Okay, so good morning. This is Gregory Harris, and I am the social worker here at Greg's Medical Center. Today we'll be discussing our domestic violence group. And here I have two of my good fellow co-workers, and they're also social workers as well. So, I'm Greg, and this is Mike, and this is Will. Okay? And so we're just here, and I'm just going to explain to you guys the importance of confidentiality. So we all know that confidentiality stays amongst within the group. We'll not be discussing, and if we discuss in the group, will not be discussed outside the group. However, I am obligated to tell you guys are obligated to tell as well if there's anyone presenting any harm or danger to self. So therefore, we're obligated to tell someone, if we suspect that a client or a patient is, being sexual abuse, emotional abuse, or some type of form of domestic violence abuse is occurring with any of our clients or patients. Okay, however, I will say that, amongst confidentiality, of course we have all signed confidentiality agreement. We also have to keep in mind that, amongst the group, we cannot promise, and I cannot promise that people or group members will not discuss personal issues that were also discussed within the group as well. We hope and pray that will be something that will not occur, but also keep in mind that, be mindful as to who you're speaking about and what you're speaking about in the situation. Due to the fact it could be pertaining to someone that's actually in the group, and they could actually either be going through it themselves, or you could possibly even come in contact with the same particular client or patient that they're working with. So be very mindful of names and things like that being used when describing a situation. So it's clear to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, any questions? No. Okay. Okay, so let's just talk about some different forms of domestic violence. Do you guys know any particular major ones that may stick out to you guys? Anything particular that you may come across and deal with on an everyday basis when dealing with your clients or your patients?
Well, certainly emotional abuse.
Okay. And what form of emotional abuse do you normally come in counsel with?
It's I found that it doesn't even matter across the entire age spectrum. There's no group in particular that stands out. It's just you'll find those really toxic relationships, and it's bad because people you would hope that most folks would have a social filter, and they don't. These parties, they don't often have that, and it's pretty obvious, and it's immediate. It's an immediate concern. Like there's no subtleties. It's pretty obvious that there's something going on, that it's maybe somebody's afraid to speak up for what they want as the patient. It's their it's their decisions that are being kind of thrown away because the partner will kind of step in, and then even in some cases it's been like a son with a mother. So it's like a similar situation.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. What about you, Freya? You ever encounter with any patients or clients with like physical abuse or emotional abuse?
Emotional abuse is pretty common. I think both children and adults. My experience with clients who suffer from emotional abuse as children, more often than not, one or both parents feel that the child is capable of making rational judgments about them. Oftentimes, the clients I see who are female suffer from emotional abuse in many forms. The failure of the spouse to acknowledge them, validate them, to belittle them, devalue them, and also have extramarital affairs as a matter of routine.
Okay, so what about physical abuse? I feel like we see a lot of physical abuse clients and patients. I feel like that's like one of the main things that you do come encounter with as a social worker who deal with domestic violence. A lot of our patients and clients that we do see, I feel like, they're presenting signs and symptoms of being actually physically hit, or the fact that they have had someone, their spouse or partner, have laid hands on them or whatnot, and this is becoming something repeatedly that constantly happens, and it's a behavior that this presents over time, and time just continues just to build up. I mean, what about physical abuse? You see a lot of clients with physical abuse, or
As far as physical abuse goes, we see mostly women and children.
mm-hmm.
Now, the women who are being physically abused, the majority of what we see are there's also they're involved in unhealthy relationships. They've suffered from physical or emotional abuse in the past with other members of the male gender. Oftentimes, there's a significant level of codependence in the relationship, and oftentimes mutual abuse. It's not a black and white issue. There are multiple dimensions to what's happening. Primarily, our concern is to ensure the safety of our client. If we're aware that they're harming themselves or going to harm another person, of course, we take action to report it or to separate them from the conditions that are harmful. When it comes to relationships, it's difficult to take somebody out of their environment against their will.
All right, so we can take a break real quick and just come right back. So, while one of our group members has stepped away, we will continue the meeting. Another one that I would find very useful would be sexual abuse. I see a lot of clients with sexual abuse as well, and I would think, to me, it seems like a lot of clients that's related more to physical abuse. I feel like sexual abuse, physical abuse, and verbal abuse comes into play. I feel like all three of those pretty much sort of kind of tie into one. It's just this, the behavior patterns pretty much are sort of kind of similar in those abusers who pretty much abuse their victims.
Our experience with clients who suffer from sexual abuse is that it is across the board. It's not just female, it's not just children. It's, there is, I think there's a propensity for those who would abuse somebody sexually to essentially be underdeveloped themselves, not bond appropriately, so on and so forth. But most of our experience is with children and adults in a position of trust, not necessarily a parent, although there is a certain level of absence and disconnection with parents of the children that this has occurred with. The children themselves are absolutely victims. More often than not, they confuse emotional attachment to an adult with the satisfaction of that adult's sexual desires, and the adult takes advantage of the naivety and the gullibility of a child. We see that pretty frequently.
Okay. And just to bring you back up to date, we know you had to step out for a moment. We're just talking about sexual and verbal abuse as far as in like you seeing your clients. You know how we pretty much sort of kind of feel they kind of tie in together. Just the fact they experience and show some of the same behaviors and things like that in the activities.
And it's I think just across the board as an umbrella, I guess, theme is that everything that we encounter is very reactive. We don't, our role in prevention is really important because we will uncover, these situations, but and of course, like I said, it's always reactive. But that's why the biggest thing is you have to master those communication skills on how to really reach out to those folks, because there's all sorts of, as Will mentioned, there's the codependency issue. They will they have certain fears based on what the environment they're coming from and then where they're going. Like while they're here, they know they have to behave a certain way. And again, it doesn't matter what age. We even have elderly folks, a geriatric population that may it starts going back the other direction. The pendulum starts going back the other way. They become just as gullible and trusting, and they may be experiencing sexual abuse and not even really know it. And then then that's the hard thing. How do you break that to somebody? That listen, this isn't okay. We want to help you. We want to get you the resources that you need. So I think that from our perspective, the prevention that we provide is really driven because of, it becomes very emotional for us because of what you see. You see the, it's all in hindsight. So when you see the damage that's been done and you realize that this person's living this, it's their life. And, you really make it your mission to make sure that they don't leave here and go somewhere safe. Now, that said, also another thing that we'll touch on, sometimes people will, you see it a lot, and there's literature on it, how people will leave an abusive relationship and enter another one. And there's some things they're out of our control.
It becomes a repeated pattern for a lot of people because that's all they know. That's what they're used and accustomed to. So they tend to gravitate to that. And although they may know in their mindset that that's wrong, they know it's wrong, but because that's where they feel most comfortable, they feel wanted. Dealing with these particular people, they feel like they make them feel like they are somebody, especially depending on it's a person-to-person situation, right? Because it depends on certain people's backgrounds. Some people a lot of times are in search for love and things like that, and the fact that they are being abused, but at the end of the day, when that abuser says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it, and I love you, makes them feel oh so much better, and makes them feel like, well, maybe it's not, he or she is not as bad as I think, maybe they didn't mean it, or they really, maybe I did, and they begin to blame self, right?
Sure.
Because they begin to feel like, oh, it's me, maybe it's because what I'm doing, what I'm saying is wrong, maybe I need to stop doing this and stop doing this, and begin to become compromising to the abuser, some people.
Absolutely.
Before they actually even realize that, they're actually being abused, and the compromising is really not needed. It's more so that you need to get out, but they don't know how to.
Exactly. You have to really teach them to recognize the honeymoon phase
of
abuse. They need to recognize that.
And you see clients like this all the time. You see patients and clients like this all the time. And a new one that has been, I never really pretty much dealt with clients like this, but a new one that's been on the rise is economic abuse. Being in relationships and marriages with people, or with your partner, shall I say, your partner or your spouse, who is now controlling of the living expenses, who control, how much money you should and should not spend, which on the good hand can be very confusing, right? Because you figure, when you're in a relationship or you're married, you figure you both come to a mutual agreement as to what, we should and should not spend on a daily basis. However, what's happening is, one is, keeping secrets from particular bank accounts or other account or other expenses that they're not telling the spouse or partner about. And so they're limiting the other spouse or partner from spending, and the other person not knowing that they are spending more than what they're supposed to. So just having, pretty much control over what is not and cannot be spent can become very abusive too, because then therefore, clients, begin to not be able to buy or really engage in different things they want to that may be expensive or may become expense to their relationship or hinder their relationship or marriage because they don't want to upset the person and afraid of what the end result could be.
And
we see clients of both genders that are essentially kept in a golden cage. The higher income earner or sole income earner, oftentimes when this happens, basically is controlling every aspect of the other party's or the other partner's life through money. And there's an essential belief that or a possessiveness involved in the control of assets and the creating an atmosphere where the other partner believes that they have no other choice and can't survive outside of the economic comfort that the higher or sole income earner is able to provide.
And I think you were about to touch on it a little bit. You know, it's difficult again when they're not recognizing it, but when they a lot of times when somebody will find out about it, it's usually through interpersonal relationships, you know, like through their friends. But when you're limiting that, you know, their capital, you know, like what they can go out and do, they don't have a social life. They don't have any social interaction because they don't have they're not giving them the money to go out to the bar and go hang out with some friends. So then within their social circle, there's no one to really point out and say, hey, wait a minute, did you just say that you can only, you know, we can only go here and you can only spend this money? You know, whatever would be the trigger to somebody outside looking in. You know, it's tying everything together. Also, with Mike said, you know, it's just when somebody that's abusive, they see another opportunity to capitalize on, to control someone. You know what I mean? Like that's why I'm not surprised that it is like a new thing because it's
absolutely,
it's something that, you know, they're always out to manipulate and control and dictate what somebody's, you know, has to do, and it's a shame because, you know, there's it's easy to see, you know, somebody coming into our hospital and, you know, they have like bruises and they have all different phases of healing, but, you know, the punishment that people are getting from the economic abuse, financial abuse, you know, I mean, it's all hidden.
And just like Marcia, keeps them in the golden cage, which they begin to make them become isolated from their circle of friends, from family and things like that, because the fact that the problem is, I mean, the financial, which brings us into the fact that the different resources that's out there. You know, people know other resources, and clients and families and all know the resources, but people are afraid to talk, right? They're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of, you know, someone going back and even telling the abuser that they saw them leaving a particular resource center or leaving or to calling a particular place. So a lot of places people are afraid that they're anonymous is not actually being anonymous, right? They feel like at some point someone's going to tell. So they tend to shy away from resources. So what do you guys normally do, or what do you normally do when you try to get help for your clients or patients as far as resources, especially those who come to you in distress, who's very scared and but want help?
So the first step for me has always been to separate. You know, I make it very strict. I shut it down. I make sure that there is no contact with that person. I make sure that security is aware, that the care team is involved. And then you start kind of finding out a little bit more of the history. People won't always say it. Again, like you said, like, you know, that's the hardest part is breaking through to somebody. You have to have somebody that is very tactful on how they communicate with somebody and their issues. You know, it's very similar, sort of parallels folks that don't, they're afraid to admit that they are getting treatment for mental illness because there can be a stigma there. You know what I mean? There's so many fears, either external or internal, that people have to deal with. So I kind of rope that into the same boat, so to speak, with you know, people that are experiencing abuse. So then you need to really encourage them that, you know, like, you need to take care of yourself. You need to promote well-being. You know, you need to say, like, you know, like, have them basically tell you and make them realize that it's not normal. You know, they need to express what they're feeling, and they need to express the fact that they are. They need to understand it in their own time, I guess, in their own perspective. They need to be able to visualize that maybe they're right. This really isn't okay. And then, you know, that can hopefully open up the door that they want help.
And what about you, any particular resources that you recommend for your clients?
We actually provide counseling to the extent that we're able to provide it. Of course, anytime somebody is in, you know, the in a situation where they're under the threat of immediate, bodily harm or danger, we do whatever we have to separate them from the situation and protect them. But we also understand that there are people who truly love each other and want to remain in a relationship together, and more often than not will involve the abuser along with the abused in those circumstances. And if we're unable to provide the necessary treatment to both partners, we find groups, counseling groups, and psychotherapists that are able to do so. We refer clients to a number of groups throughout the area. A lot of the clients that we get, more often than not, are willing to live with emotional abuse if they can work through it with their partner. So, of course, cases of human trafficking, physical violence against children, against spousal partners or boyfriends and girlfriends, what have you, we separate them to the best of our ability to do so. But ultimately, you can't control everything. So perhaps mitigating the circumstances to the best of our ability to help people heal together is an approach that we take.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for attending the group today. We will pick back up next week. And then we'll talk more and discuss furthermore on different resources that we can actually provide. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
You're so much better at bullshitting than I am.